Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with veteran jazz trumpeter, composer, educator, and record producer John Vanore. He opened up with us about his latest 2020 CD that was inspired by some lost tapes he found called Primary Colors. He was a blue-collar kid from the Philadelphia suburbs that began playing the trumpet at the age of 7. He would go on to attend a summer program directed by the great Oliver Nelson at Indiana University, and that changed his life forever. After college, he hit the ground booming after he joined the legendary Woody Herman Band, and he would go on to play with the likes of Tony Bennett, Mel Torme, Peggy Lee, and so many others. Over the years, he has taught, performed, and recorded quite a bit. He's a very active cat with a lot of great stories and insights, so please get to know him and dig this interview, my friends.
So, hey, John, thanks for taking a minute out for Neon Jazz. It's equally a thrill. I appreciate you taking your time out.
Oh, not a problem.
I received the CD, Primary Colors, and I've been really digging up on this. I just want to know from you, what was your vision with this project, and do you think you achieved what you were going for?
Well, actually, yes. It was kind of like, it was an odd project to happen because about a year ago, I had been rooting around in just boxes that I had, and I found lots of old DAT tapes and cassette tapes. I also have a 12-piece large ensemble that I write all the music for called Abstract Truth. I don't know if you checked my website, but I've done a bunch of recordings with that. So I thought, I got to take like a year, and I had enough stuff to do 3 reissues of all that material. So I found in the mid-'80s, Ron Thomas also played in my large ensemble, the pianist. And I found these cassettes of all the duets we used to do. We had it for a few years. We would get together and play duets quite frequently and record them. And at the time, we didn't really record them to be motivated to be released. We just did it as the challenge of playing duets but not taking like a bebopper approach and see how, if we can get creative with things. So I found the tapes, and unfortunately, there's a lot that was lost. These were just cassettes of the original things that were done on reel-to-reel tapes and reel-to-reel multi-tracks. So I thought, these should see the light of day. So then I set about to remaster them, and I thought, the project would really highlight where we were at that time. So with that in mind, I'm thrilled with the outcome because with the remastering, it made them sound much more contemporary and present from a sound standpoint, so you can really enjoy the interplay.
That's an interesting standpoint there. I mean, you're talking about something from the past and blending it with the present. So my question to you is this. You've been at this for quite a while. How do you view your evolution as a jazz musician and your sound? Where do you think it started, and where do you think you're at right now?
Wow. I haven't thought about that for a while. So where it started. I've always loved big bands. I played in Woody Herman's band, so there's a whole piece of me that loves that thing. And then, but I studied with a guy in Philly named Dennis Sandole, who was a phenomenal. His list of students, the guys, Art Farmer and James Moody, Thad Jones, and his most famous student was Coltrane. If you look at the Coltrane records that say he studied in the 50s at the Grana School of Music in Philadelphia for a couple of years, that was the name of the school, but the reason he was there was because Dennis Sandole was the teacher, and he studied with Dennis. And so Dennis introduced me to a whole different kind of individualistic harmonic language approach, i.e., you don't have to be a bebopper. And so I really embraced that. And then, but I played the trumpet, and I love playing in big bands too. So what started me out with that, so my sound was oriented to be the bold sound of playing in a big band. So, but I always loved Miles, and I loved Freddie Hubbard, but I also loved Thad Jones and Art Farmer and Kenny Wheeler. And there's a more, so that's like a division of, I always had this, one side tugging on the other of playing like with the sound, the bold sound of the trumpet players like Freddie Hubbard, but with this other kind of intimacy like a Kenny Wheeler or an Art Farmer.
You started relatively young in Philadelphia, playing the trumpet at the age of 7. Talk to me a little bit about your childhood and how you really got your teeth sunk in the whole jazz world.
So yeah, I started playing trumpet at 7. It's actually, I think the story's kind of funny. So, coming from a blue-collar family in a really small town where the high school band was, I think there's only about 30 in the high school band. And I loved playing the trumpet, but I never aspired to go into music because with that blue-collar background, I really wasn't exposed to a different level of what could be the possibilities to me. And I wasn't motivated to be a high school band director because the situation I was in didn't seem that enriching, and I love science too. So you have to factor in, I'm a 60s child, so it was the space race, and I was really infatuated with that. And fortunately, I was really good at science and math. And I thought, well, I'll play the trumpet through college, and then that'll be it. And the trumpet actually came pretty natural to me, I have to say. I worked at it, but I was fortunate that the sound that I have now, I had when I was 16, and the chops and all that kind of stuff. So then I started I went to the University of Delaware and did orientation for engineering. And I told my father, I said, I don't know, this is really not what I expected. I don't know, I got to take a year off and figure this out. So he said, blue collar guy, you have to do something in that year. You can't take the year off. So I said, okay, I'll go to school and I'll take business and I'll use that as a holding pattern. So I went to a local college, which I ended up teaching at, ironically, and then I took business. And at the end of that year, I was kind of bored with it because, I was really like a science technology geek of the day. So I found out that there was a summer camp at the Indiana University in the summer of 1966 that was being run by Oliver Nelson, who I didn't really know a lot about. But I went to that summer camp at IU and went to the first rehearsal that Oliver Nelson did. And in the first 4 measures of Rubens' Rondo, I said to myself, I'm going to do this. It was just one of those pivotal moments in your life where I decided at that moment I would do that. So then I came home from there, told my father I'm going to play the trumpet. And he said, you're going to have to finish and get a degree. I said, okay, I'll make it work. And then I found a friend of mine suggested I look up Dennis, and I started studying with Dennis. Dennis steered me also to concurrent with the jazz studies, study with a classical trumpet player, and I did that for 4 years too. So I did 5 years with Dennis, 4 years with the classical trumpet player, but this wasn't in a degree program. Actually got the business degree, never did it for a day, finished college and went on the road with Woody Herman's band.
That's great.
It's kind of a crazy, convoluted story, but that's really it. And really the turning point of that, and that's why I did my record Stolen Moments. When I did that like 3 years ago, I thought, I have to do this payback to Oliver Nelson because that was the biggest influence for my whole life. That really set the path, So I did that record to honor him.
What was it like to be around Oliver? I get the feeling that was a real pivotal moment in your life as well as a mentor. What did he give you that's resonated all these years in you?
It was that individuality and the uniqueness, just being different and being so prolific. And, I don't know how much you know about him. He died when he was 43 years old in 1975. When I started teaching, I corresponded with him after I came back from Woody Herman's band, I started teaching part-time. And then I was playing trumpet full-time in Philadelphia, playing for shows and record dates and things. And I got a bunch of his music from him, his big band charts. And then in 1975, he died at 43. In that short time that he lived, he did about 80 albums. It's about 80. That's a phenomenal body of work.
Wow.
It's almost like how he had the time to even record them, but somebody else wrote the music, but he wrote all the music. And with that, he wrote all the 6 seasons of The $6 Million Man and some movies and other stuff. He was so prolific and so unique when you think about that period that in that early 60s period, now Thad Jones has risen as, the mecca of the big band evolving in the 60s. But if you think about it, Oliver Nelson wrote all those things, more and varied things in the same period of time. But he died in 1975, and he's kind of been forgotten. I mean, even when I did my recording date in New York, I got a bunch of my buddies there to do my Stolen Moments project. Of course, when I told them the project I wanted to do, they all knew who Oliver Nelson was, and they know the music. But as we did the project for the 3 days, we only spent 3 days doing it, I was telling them more about his background, and they couldn't believe he did that much stuff, and that for the most part, it's kind of off the radar. I mean, he's not in the Downbeat Hall of Fame. So it's really fascinating. So I came from that influence of his individuality, and then and Dennis's same direction, and I think even being myself a little scientific, I was always into what's the unknown and what's the undiscovered. So, and let's try to be different. Like my large ensemble is really different. It's only 12 people. It has a French horn, just 2 saxophones. It's a whole different approach to writing for that kind of thing. The vibe of a big band, but is mainly oriented around the soloist. So that was kind of my motivation. And then, so like 4 years ago, when I decided to retire from teaching full time, so I can have more time to do music. I'm really not retired. I just changed what I work at all day long. So I had on my kitchen table, I had all the original music I got from Oliver Nelson. So now this music's like old yellow and faded and ripped and everything like that. And my wife said, "What's all this stuff?" And she knew about my Oliver Nelson background. And I said, "This is all the music that I got from Oliver Nelson." And she said, "You should do a project of that." And I said, "Well, I don't do other people's music. I'm really about trying to be original." And I said, "Okay, I'll think about it." And then I experimented with like rewriting, using his tunes as a core and writing my arrangement set for my size special ensemble, large ensemble. So that's the big influence of Oliver Nelson. He was a great improviser, an unbelievable improviser, besides being a writer. That was the other thing that knocked me out.
So you have been fortunate to be around some pretty heavy hitters in jazz, and Woody Herman had to be a big part of that. But you've been around a lot of other people like Mel Torme and Peggy Lee. What did you learn at a young, formidable age about being around the legends and luminaries? The most interesting thing is in the situation I was in Philly, there was a 2,000-seat theater. It was kind of crazy to think that existed here in the 70s. And we had essentially a big band with the house orchestra. And when I got back from Woody's band, I played in that. And then we had Peggy and Tony Bennett and all these people, actually even all the Motown people. The thing, and the guy who I met there that was older than me that played lead trumpet in that, ended up playing lead trumpet in my big band. We became close friends. And the thing I got was how to adapt and kind of be a chameleon. That 1 week you have to play like you've been playing for Peggy Lee your whole life. And then the next week you have to play for Gladys Knight and the Pips as if that's the only thing you've been doing for your life. And to adapt your style and approach to fit what you want. So I kind of morphed that into my big band, that the style is a little bit like this and a little bit like that, but it doesn't really emulate anybody. I tried to be unique. And same thing in my improvising, that I hope comes across in the Primary Color CD, that it's really not very predictable in some of the outcomes. Absolutely. So let me ask you this. If you have a dream tonight, you run into your younger self, say, 30 years younger, just when you're getting ready to kind of hit all of this road of jazz that you've been on, what advice would you give your younger self?
Wow. What advice would I give my younger self? That's a fascinating question. I would have probably said make more records earlier. Document yourself even more. some guys that I've taught as students and guys that I've mentored, I've told them, you need to record all you can. You need to document yourself. Even if it's just for yourself, you need to self-evaluate and become a true artist. And I don't mean a musician artist. I mean artist in the umbrella sense of the word, the way a lot of times painters might have 10 or 20 versions of a painting before they finally get to the one that's the painting that we all know. And that's really the development of the art, is constantly renew yourself. And I would have tried to renew myself even more.
The one thing they always say about teaching is that you tend to sometimes you get more out of the process than you actually give. So my question, after all these years of teaching, what surprised you that you've learned about the process of jazz and of giving and taking? What's that meant to you, and what have you gotten from it?
I think the fit that I ended up being in, where the university I taught, I had mainly engineers and science majors in the band, which really kind of hooked up with how I think from actually originally wanting to do that. So I really could relate to those guys. And because they were smart, basically played really good. And I had mainly students who could have probably majored in music, but decided to take engineering or biology or something like that. So it really clicked on a good level. And it made me teach them in the same development of style and analysis. So in what they lacked in mechanics, they didn't lack in their ability to comprehend style. So it really made me be more analytical in all the things I did. And I think that crossed into the way I approached the things I wrote and things like that.
So what was one of the very first jazz shows you saw that made you think, man, this is something that I can do? This is something that I'd like to get involved with?
Oh, well, the thing that really flipped me was that first rehearsal that Oliver Nelson led. I remember I sat next to the French horn player, and like I said, in 4 measures, it was, I'm going to do this. It was like, I never was that close. I was 19 years old. I was never close to any music that was written like that. And that was it. That was the turning point. And then after that, I just saw everybody I could. I was fortunate to live in the period of, you could go see Freddie Hubbard, Miles Davis. I saw Miles a lot, Freddie a lot. So that was a great live experience to see them.
After all of these years that you've been in the music industry, are you happy with where everything's led up to this point in your life?
Yeah, I can't complain. I mean, I have, you always think, should I have done that? Should I have done that? I have a friend that's a composer in New York, and he's we talk a lot, and I've produced recording projects for him, and he said, he always tells me, you should have moved to New York. And I go, well, I don't know, then things wouldn't have turned out the way they did. They would have been fine, but they would have been different. I don't know if they'd be better, to be honest. They just would have been different.
Yeah. Was there a moment on stage? Was there a concert, a moment that you had where you got off stage that was just totally surreal? That you just was like, wow, that was unbelievable.
Wow, to think about that, unbelievable. I think if I have to pick one time, I think it was the first night I played in Woody Herman's band. The first night, because I met the band in Milwaukee, and so you meet the band, you get into the band by recommendation then, and I met the road manager in the lobby of the hotel. They were coming from Chicago on the bus. I flew to Milwaukee and met them. I met him in the lobby when they got there. He handed me a jacket and a road case. He said, here's your coat, here's music. I'll see you at the King's 4. It's 3 blocks from here at 8 o'clock. And I thought, okay. And that was it. And then in the first set, the trumpet player next to me said, I remember the tune. Woody had an arrangement of MacArthur Park, and at the end of MacArthur Park, multiple trumpet players would solo. And this is my first night on the band. The trumpet player next to me, because I was standing on the end, he said, Woody's going to point to you. When he points to you, you go out front and solo. And I could remember that. I could remember the whole thing of going out there thinking, oh my God, this is it. I mean, trial by fire. And then the whole thing is I got to stand in front of the band in the first set that I played, not just be in the back, the trumpets are in the back row. So when the trumpets came in with the background line, it was like goosebumps. And then, they play the figure and then you start the solo. And that's really an indelible memory for me.
So why do you love jazz?
Oh, why do I love jazz? It's the unknown, the creativity of it, the unpredictability. The more unpredictable it is, the better.
Right on. So everything's going to come down to this. Everyone has a perception or their version of who they think you are. Your family, your friends, students, fans. But you're living your life. Who do you think you are?
Who do I think I am? I'm John Vanore. I always wanted to be me.
I love that answer. That's great. That's great. It's one of the best answers I've ever had to that question, man. That's great. John, this has been wonderful, man. Thank you for the music. Thank you for your time. It's been illuminating and wonderful, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for calling.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest cats in Philadelphia, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to John for his time and his cool. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.